Jennings and a leading healthcare marketing and consumer engagement firm. He is a healthcare marketer, blogger, author, and sought-after speaker. He has been designated a top healthcare marketing contributor by OrganizedWisdom.com and a top health blogger in WellSphere's health industry and policy community. Dan serves on the National Advisory Board of Healthcare Marketing Advisor and is a contributor to Reagan's Healthcare Marketing and Communication News. He is on the judging panels for the National Health Information Awards and the Web Health Awards, and was recently named to the editorial board for eHealthcare Strategy and Trends magazine. So I want to welcome both Dan and Lyle this morning, and they're going to share with us their vision for the digital future of physician marketing. So thank you.
Thanks, Carla. After those intros, I think we're done. If you would just fill out your evaluations on the way out, and I can help, with any prompts you need. Thank you for having us here today. This is the Lyle and Dan show. We're really excited to share with you today. And this is different from a lot of presentations we do, and I do, in that we are, the first half of the presentation, we're going to share with you some of the work we've done. It is some show and tell, which I think is useful and has a place at a conference like this. But the second half isn't show and tell at all, it's thinking. We are engaged in trying to figure out where physician marketing and physician relations is going to go, where it should go, where we want to take it. We don't want to wait to see what happens. We want to be ahead of the curve, or at least riding that wave that's happening right now with all the digital stuff that's happening in the world. And this is a conversation Lyle and I have been having for at least a year. In fact, last summer, we started this conversation. So we're just inviting you in, literally inviting you in, maybe not into our living room, but our conference room, to have a discussion about the future of physician relations and how we integrate digital strategies. So that's it. Now, I'll tell you a story about this slide. In 2010, I wrote a rant on my blog about physician relations and how backwards the industry was, how we were doing so little to market to referring physicians that was different from what we've done over the last, however many years. The same old strategies. And I was working on a new physician relations program for a client of mine, Cooper University Healthcare, and they're just outside the Philly metro. And I had gone online on LinkedIn and said, hey, does anybody, because they have all these great LinkedIn groups. I love LinkedIn groups. Do you guys belong to any? I think they're a great source of networking, tapping into thought leaders in the industry. So I went online and said, does anybody have any ideas? Who's doing something novel? And I got nothing back novel. It was all the same old stuff, host CMEs, it's just everything you've heard about. Visit physician practices. Okay, we've been doing that, right? So I wrote this rant saying, are there no new ideas out there in physician marketing? The world has changed, and we haven't changed with it. And some crazy guy named Lyle Green leaves me a comment. I'd never met Lyle. I had heard of him because he's like the Wizard of Oz. He's very famous. He's the grand dame of physician relations. But Lyle leaves me a message on my blog, a comment saying, hey, thanks for talking, because I pointed out in my blog post that MD Anderson was one of the few firms I found that was actually doing stuff that was unique. This is 2010. They had a Twitter feed dedicated to referring physicians. They had a Facebook page dedicated just to referring physicians. They were using paper.ly, and Lyle will show you some of this stuff when he does his part of the presentation. I was blown away, and I couldn't find anybody else doing what they were doing. They did what Seth Godin was talking about this morning. They left, not knowing if there was any place to land. And they built their parachute on the way down. And Lyle and I are still building parachutes as we go. But it was great. Lyle tells the story very differently. He tells this as a cautionary tale. He says, don't respond to people's blog posts. Don't comment, because you might end up having to speak with them at conferences or co-author papers. And indeed, that's what we've spent the last 3 years doing together. So it was the start of a great friendship. But it's a testament to the power of social media, honestly. But Lyle and I both have this passion, and passion is such an overused term, but passion for figuring out where physician relations needs to go. And you're part of that today. And I hope that's why all of you are here. And I don't need to build the case. I will spend a couple of minutes on physician adoption of digital technologies, digital communication, social media. Anybody not agree with me that they are starting to move in that direction? Anybody disagree with that? Okay, good. Then I'm going to skip the next 6 slides. But they are. This was a 2012 study, and I'm not even going to go through all this. JMIR did it, but look, what physicians said was they felt like when sharing knowledge through social media with other physicians, it is a high-quality platform for communicating. A good way to get information, 37%. Engaging, 36%. Beneficial, 32%. Those are small numbers, but they're important numbers, right? Because it's a movement. They're moving that way. They aren't rapidly adopting social media. They're gradually adopting it. But the first place professionally that they're adopting social media is to communicate with their colleagues, to learn more about the profession, to gather insights about whatever their specialty is. I mean, you guys know Doximity and Surma, right? How many physicians belong to those platforms? Those are physician-only social media platforms, communities. Anybody know?
275,000.
It's huge, yeah. I mean, last I knew, Surmo had 150,000, and I can't remember the Doximity number, and Doximity is the hot one right now. Most doctors I know are going towards Doximity, but there's definitely a trend for physicians to use these platforms and social media, social networks, to communicate with one another, to share information, to learn, and so on. And that's what's driving a lot of what Lyle and I are doing. And here you have a doctors versus, I love this, will never use in a survey. Who would ever say, I will never use? That's very closed-minded. But you know, 33% of these physicians said, I will never use Twitter professionally. I will never use blogs. I mean, how many physician bloggers do you know? There's lots of them out there, and they're phenomenal. Facebook, 26% will never use Facebook, but 19% already are. So are these people wrong? You know, YouTube. What's wrong with YouTube? It's a video platform. You can learn so much. Crazy. So you get my point. These people are moving in this direction, at least some of them. We need to be there, and I want to be ahead of the curve. I want, when 60% of these people are big social media users professionally, I want Lyle and myself to be there ready to communicate with them. More data. And these are all in our slides, so you can look at them in more detail. So I was working with Cooper University Healthcare when I met Lyle, and I was trying to put together a physician relations program that was different. They had huge leakage. It was a big challenge. They were losing a ton of referrals from their own employed docs, not to mention from the community docs. And we put together, they were doing a ton of work in physician relations. I mean, they had mounds of paper things they were passing out, and physician relations specialists or liaisons, whatever you call them in your organization, were out there handing stuff out and trying to meet with doctors and annoying practice managers and all that kind of stuff that we do really well. My firm created the South Jersey Medical Report. And we didn't call it the Cooper Medical Report because we wanted to own South Jersey. So we just owned it and called it South Jersey. And it's a digital platform. You'd think when you hear medical report, it's a paper document. No. It is a digital platform. This is a microsite just for physicians where they can learn about our specialties, meet our physicians through videos. They can download paper copies of the medical report if they want, or PDFs. And we did print out actual versions of the medical report that the liaisons could take out to different practices, because I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, some of these old technologies really do still work. But it was this comprehensive platform. It included a Twitter feed dedicated to physicians. It included an Inside Cooper blog. One of the cool things about this is we were creating content for referring physicians, video and written content. It gave us extra content to leverage across lots of other platforms for the organization. So the web pages for these different services became much richer, because suddenly we had podcasts, we have videos, we have written narratives telling the story of this expertise for each of these departments. Another program we put together was for Tufts Medical Center. Tufts was in a similar situation. They have a physician organization. And again, those physicians are not compelled to refer to Tufts Medical Center or to Tufts Children's Hospital, which is floating hospital for children at Tufts Medical Center. So I went out and interviewed these physicians to find out what was getting in the way of making referrals. And I interviewed practice managers. I will tell you, for the physician, most of the time when I go around and interview physicians and just talk to them, the reason I find them not making a referral is fear. Does that surprise anybody? It's fear. If you're going to make a referral, let's take an example in Boston. One of the top children's hospitals in the country is Boston Children's, right? Well, if you're a physician who's part of NEQA and you're getting ready to make a referral to Floating Hospital for Children, which is part of Tufts, your fear is the parents are going to, this is a pretty ill child, first of all. It's serious. It's a big deal for this family. And you're telling them, we're going to send your child to Floating Hospital for Children. What's the parent going to say? Carla got it. Why not Boston Children's? They're the best in the world. I hear their TV commercials all the time. I hear it on the radio. They've got a great jingle. Why are U.S. News and World Report says they're one of the top 2. Sometimes CHOP gets in the way, but so why not? So if you're the physician, that's a risky scenario to make a referral to another world-class hospital, another world-class organization that they're going to get great care at and be taken care of. But man, those parents aren't going to get that. And they're probably not going to do what you tell them. So part of the situation with Floating and with Tufts was we had to come in and create the expectation on the part of the parents that this is the referral that's going to be made and learn more about these organizations before they ever see the physician. So we created this campaign, and this is the physician microsite that goes with the campaign, where a physician can come, they can find a specialist, they can download fact sheets about it. We're empowering the physician with information that they can share with their patients. We're making it easy to make a referral, taking the risk out of the referral process. We have quality data for them, showing them that Tufts has actually better quality numbers than any other hospital in that market. I learned from Dr. Natasha in one of these presentations. She was talking about how she puts those dry erase boards on the back of the exam room door. So when patients are sitting there, and you know how that is, they put you in there and then you've got another 15 minutes before you see a doctor. Well, you've got time to kill. So we put those, I took Natasha's idea. I say, hallelujah, great idea. And we ran with it. So we took those write-on wipe-off boards or dry erase boards, put the QR code on there. So if you're sitting there and you're just killing time, you've got your smartphone, go to that webpage and learn about Floating Hospital for Children and why we make those referrals there. The last campaign I'm going to quickly show you is Signature Physicians campaign. And this was a case where it was more about physician retention, actually, than communicating with referring physicians. But obviously, we created a platform that would do both. So we created a microsite. Signature was worried about their physicians being hired away by another group. Contracts were coming up for renewal, very competitive. They're in the Boston market. We created a microsite. We videotaped as many of their physicians are recorded on video. I guess there's no tape involved, but we recorded as many of their physicians as possible, put their videos up on the microsite. Now you can go online and meet those physicians. And if you go to mysignaturephysician.com, you can check out the microsite, you can play. I think we recorded 80 of the physicians now. I'm doing 20 more next month. But it was a great way to introduce the physicians, because think about it this way. Those referring physicians that you're trying to communicate with, they do not have time to meet your doctors for the most part. They don't. And when they go to your website and look at, whatever the Find a Provider page is and learn about your docs, they get that ugly headshot and some bullets from a CV that look like somebody else's CV, everybody else's CV. Why not give them a video? They want to meet your doctors, but they don't have the time. In a minute, you can do that. To me, it's a no-brainer. There's an up-close with one of the doctors, and we try to put in interesting things, like Dr. Zhaja enjoys fishing and golf and has a secret desire to be a comedian. And he's the chief of cardiology. So, Lyle, you're up for MD Anderson.
As Dan and I have been talking about this for a couple of years, what we look at as the digital future. Dan came and visited with us about a year ago, I guess now?
Yeah, it's probably this time last year.
Yeah. We spent a day, sat down with myself, my management team, and our liaison group, and we just sort of brainstormed about this whole idea of the digital stuff and liaisons role going forward, and how can we do a better job. And that turned into, this is another one thing, if you respond to Dan's blog, you do a talk with him. If you invite him to your living room, you do an article with him. So I'm telling you, be careful.
Next up, Lyle can have a book out. Just wait.
He makes you work, but it's good. It's all fun. So, you know, at the end of that session, we put the article together out there about the digital future of physician relations, where we really wanted to sit down and start having that conversation about how do we get the liaisons actually engaged in doing things like using Twitter, using the Facebook, get them out there more involved in things like the portal, the online tools, and that sort of thing. So that's kind of where we are today. That brings everything current, both the things we're already doing and the things Dan's done with other organizations, the things we're doing at MD Anderson right now, and also our thinking about what's next. So we've got a few ideas, and Dan's going to come up. We're just going to tag team this a little bit with
Yeah,
you
stay
guys.
up here. We'll do it together.
Want me to stay here? I can't
Yeah.
sit down and drink mine.
We're like the odd couple, aren't we?
Well, one of us is, anyway.
One cannot be a couple. I just have you know.
That's all right. Okay, I'll go over here then. How about that?
All right, that's fine.
We'll get each side of the room covered.
You know, one of the things I don't like about presentations like this, when I'm sitting out where you guys are sitting and looking this way, is I hear somebody from MD Anderson talking about all the great things they're doing, and I think, well, damn, I don't have the resources that MD Anderson has, right? But I will tell you, Lyle doesn't have a lot of resources, and all the social and digital stuff they've done has been done by one employee who has a lot of other responsibilities, but he's just proactive, and I'll give Lyle credit. Lyle doesn't ask permission a lot, and I hope none of your executives hear about this, but he doesn't ask permission. He just charges ahead, and he didn't get anybody's permission to do the Twitter feed or to do the paper.ly account or all those things. And something like paper.ly, it publishes every day automatically. You don't have to do anything. You just set up your faculty tweeters, and it pulls in those feeds. It aggregates them and puts them out there for the public, and it sends out a tweet automatically. So, I mean, there are some really smart tools you can do to be a lot more digitally present.
But you know what, Dan? It wasn't too long after we started some of those things that suddenly the institution decided we needed a social media policy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and we're really going to freak them out when we have the liaisons out tweeting and
Not that we did anything wrong, but it was suddenly there's a social media
Yeah.
policy in place now. We have to be certified, and we get checked up on, and if we don't do enough tweets, they want to shut the account down. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah. So the conversation we want to involve you all in, and Lyle's, I think, painted the picture about half of the challenge and opportunity here. The challenge is, even people like Lyle and myself, where we've started creating all these digital assets and digital platforms for communicating with physicians and their staffs. Okay, we've got that. And we've got the very first few slides I showed you about maybe 30% of the physicians actually using these types of platforms. Right? So we've got these two things. We've got this digital content. We've got 30% of the physicians willing to use it. But A, they don't know about it. They're very busy people, right? So we have to connect those. And then we've got the other 70% who aren't using them right now, but who we can educate and bring along rather than wait for. And we can actually be catalysts in that and bring them into this digital domain and let them know. You know, if you're a referring physician somewhere in the Houston market or anywhere in the United States and you're interested in sending patients to MD Anderson and learning more about what kind of great things they're doing at MD Anderson, clinical trials, whatever it might be, it would be helpful to know that, hey, you can access their docs on Twitter. You know, you can subscribe to this Twitter feed. You can do all these different things. We've got a portal where you can come and get the kind of information you need. So what we have to do now, I mean, we all recognize we have to create these we have to be aggregators of digital content. We have to create these platforms. How do we bring those two worlds together? That's really the challenge moving forward. So Lyle and I sat down with his team last spring, as he mentioned, and we really came up with three key questions. And Lyle has pointed out the first one, which is, you know, with our resources are diminishing, they're not growing. How do we make more out of what we have? How do we do more? And the digital world gives us that opportunity. If suddenly our physician liaisons are spending 10 minutes a day tweeting, sending out links to content, doing those kinds of things, and then when they're making their calls, because they're not going to stop visiting physician practices, they just can only see so many. But when they're making their calls, they can be spending their time actually saying, hey, do you know about this? Do you follow Dr. So-and-so on Twitter? What? No? You know, let me show you. Do you know about our faculty tweeters, paper.ly newsletter that comes out every day on Twitter? No. Oh, let me help you. Do you know how to use our portal? Have you signed up for our portal? No. Let me help you with that. So that's an opportunity. But based on my experience with social media, if you're not a user of social media, it's very hard to sell it. So what we have to do with Lyle's, they call them physician specialists at MD Anderson. What we have to do with the physician specialists is turn them into social media users and believers so that they can then convey that to the people in the practices that they're visiting. And they become a communicator and an educator, or communicators and educators for MD Anderson. They're educating these people at these practices and bringing them to all the digital assets we have to offer. So that's the first question. How can we be more effective? Questions 2 and 3, how can a physician's relations program stay ahead of the curve? We want to be there when all these doctors are truly digital physicians. And then how can our team use these technologies to readily support target programs? Well, if you've got a team of, how many specialists do you have right now?
8.
You've got 8 specialists, and they're tweeting out links to whatever that clinical specialty or subspecialty is that you're really trying to drive traffic for. And I'm sure at MD Anderson they have 3 or 4 that they target at any one time, saying, hey, we've got potential here. There's capacity. We need patient volume. Let's start pushing this. And I'm sure there are plenty of services that don't have potential and capacity at any one time. So let's be strategic. Take those programs that need the patient volume, and let's be communicating about those and really putting the word out. Suddenly you've got 8 marketers who we're going to train, and we're going to do this later this month. Today's May 1st. We're going to do this May 29th, where we're going to go in and train them how to use social media, how to use Twitter, how to use third-party applications like Hootsuite so that they can tweet. What do you guys think about that idea? What scares you? What do you love about that idea? Because I know, believe me, I know, I'm a little scared myself. Yes?
I'm sorry, could you tell me the term again? Faculty...
Tweeters.
That's what you call the page? Like the faculty...
It's a paper.ly newsletter that comes out once a day. You can schedule the frequency, but it comes out once a day on Twitter, automatically tweets out. And all it does is it takes, you tell it to aggregate, in Lyle's case, all of his faculty members who are on Twitter, to aggregate all their tweets for the day. And they pull them in and send them out in a newsletter form. So it looks like, for people who aren't very digitally savvy, it looks like a regular print newsletter on a page, but it's got all his physicians tweeting and the kinds of things they're excited about. Research that's come out, new clinical trials that they're working on, whatever it might be. Who has their hand up?
It's also easier than following 75 different faculty members individually. You can follow them just through the tweeters daily. It's easier that way.
And you push that out on a tweet?
Yeah, and it goes out automatically. You don't have to do anything. You just set it up and it goes once a day.
Do you push it out on everyone's Twitter feed?
Well, anybody who follows MD Anderson on Twitter then has that pop up in their feed.
So from the master account?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So now you're training the liaisons or the specialists, but are the physicians also trained? Are you
Not in that.
finding their feeds and then working with them, or is it just?
Well, I think the training that we're going to do with liaisons is sort of 2-part. One is, as Dan says, we're going to teach them how to use the tools, the basic stuff like what we've seen today. The second part of that is we're going to sit down and spend some time with, okay, it's one thing for a liaison to tweet. Well, who are you tweeting to? How are they going to know you're tweeting as a liaison? If I've got a territory that I'm covering, as you saw on the maps, I want my liaisons. Get out there as you're talking to folks in person, let them know that they can follow you, and that's a more efficient way for them to keep up with what's going on at Anderson if they need to do that, whether it's refer a patient or what have you, get out the educational materials. But also, if I need something, this is my liaison, I could just send you a direct message through Twitter, and I can get you right away.
But the physicians that you're aggregating all
Our
their feeds,
Right.
do they have any kind of training on kind of how it's best to put content out?
That's not been done. Now, what has been done is if the faculty members request it. I think a lot of people, they go out and do it on their own. But we also have a resource in our communications office who they'll go out and sit down with the faculty member. We'll do it too if they call us, but the communications folks are really the ones who do that. And they'll sit down and give them the full orientation to Twitter, Facebook, whatever they're doing. So it's there if they want to do it, but a lot of them just, they know how to do all this stuff, they just go.
But since I follow their Twitter feeds, I will tell you they're very conservative in the way they use Twitter. They're very cognizant of their role representing the institution, and they know that, you know, there might be patients listening in as well. So
I'm just curious, do you track conversions too to see the success of that?
Right now, that's real hard for us to do, other than looking at who's following us and how many folks are following us. Are they physicians? Are they non-physicians? The conversion this is the information system business, is you've got all these different systems, and all of that doesn't track all the way through. We can get close in some cases and not so close in others. For example, we can tell if somebody's tweeted a link that takes you to the portal. Now, if you did something in the portal tomorrow, I can't associate that with a tweet and a link the day before necessarily, if that makes sense.
But the thing I would say about that, because it's an excellent question, and you can look at Google Analytics for their physician relations site and see what traffic Twitter is driving, for example. So there is that measure. That's not ROI, but that's a measure of what kind of traffic we're driving and so on. But I would say one thing to think about when you think about the changes we're trying to make, and remember, we're just doing this. You know, we're inviting you in, but I think about it more in terms of the traditional role of the physician specialist, where they're out there building a relationship, hopefully, rather than annoying people. They're building relationships, they're creating trust, and they're conveying information. And the way I look at relationships is value is the component. You know, what value do you bring? And by integrating the digital stuff into the mix, we're bringing greater value into the relationship. And we're recognizing for those physicians that are already digital, and who prefer that kind of communication, we're recognizing that that's a value to you. And we share that value, and we're going to give you information the way you want it. Because I think that's what good marketing is all about. Looking at your target audience and saying, how do you want the information? What makes it easier for you in your life? Not how does MD Anderson want to communicate it. And I have to say, in healthcare, we've done it backwards for years. We've said, we're going to communicate with you the way that works best for us. So we're going to send our physician liaisons into your practice and interrupt your day, and you're trying to see 50 patients in a day. I mean, that's the way we've done it. And what we're trying to say is, hey, we know there's another way, at least for many of you. Yes?
Did you have to recruit your faculty to get accounts, and do they have a professional and a personal account? Or?
The first question was, did we have to recruit faculty to participate? No, we do that as part of what we call our growth planning. When we work with a center that's wanting to grow referrals, that's one of the items on the list, is we're going to ask, we'd like at least one faculty member from your group to tweet and to get online with us. Now, most have done that, but not everybody does. So it is one thing we talk about, and you can call that sort of recruitment in a way. Whether they have a personal account or not, I know some do, and some even do a little personal tweeting in their answers, but not much. If they do have a personal account, we don't honestly pay attention to it, or we're not actively looking for it, if you will.
Yes?
Knowing that physicians are not always the ones who are the key decision makers in the office.
Absolutely.
So,
You're right on.
Are you currently doing anything with those other physician extenders or key people in the office?
It's a great thing, and I'll just get into this now since you've asked the question. I always tell people, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, regular communication, the old school traditional stuff still works. And it works great in combination with the digital stuff. So one of the things we're going to do is when our liaisons go out, what we want to do is arm them with stuff like a simple card that says, here are ways to connect with MD Anderson through digital platforms. And it will have, here's our patient portal, and here's the URL. Here's how to, because you can subscribe to the paper.ly account you were asking about earlier. You can subscribe to that. So here's how you go and subscribe and follow our faculty tweeters. Here's our Facebook account for cancer resources. Boom. So using that, and obviously the point of contact initially won't be the physician. It will be one of those extenders or a practice manager or someone else. So yes, that is a great question. We don't in any way dismiss the importance of that audience. And it's really important to bring them along with the social media just as we do the doctors. And my guess is a lot of them have even further to go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious. So I think this is all very exciting, and I love the things you guys are doing. I'm curious, do you measure any broader indicators, whether it's physician satisfaction or leakage or broader things that maybe can't connect specifically, but I'll tell that story?
There are a ton of things we measure and look at in terms of data. The physician portal is a real easy one. I told you, how many physicians are signed up on the portal. You know how many referrals they've made. Actually, new patient referrals lifetime through the portal by the end of this year. I can tell you where those physicians are, who they are, what countries they're in. And the conversion there is easy because we visit with a physician through a liaison or the other means, and someone registers on the portal. That's our tracking right there, and then we can track how many referrals they're making. We can also track when they're logging in to look at medical record information and that sort of thing. The physician relations microsite, we can also track activity in terms of what people are looking at. What's really interesting about that site, there are really only two things that physicians there are looking at. It's either they're looking up faculty information specifically, or they're looking up information on how to refer a patient, which we thought was a little surprising. We didn't think it would be as strong as it was. Physician satisfaction is a really good question. We spent probably 10, 12 years running continuous surveys, 900 plus surveys every month for new referring physicians. Did that for 10 or 12 years. Response rate, printed mail survey again, back to the paper thing. Response rate went from about 35% down to about 4% over the life of the survey. We shut it off about a year and a half ago because it wasn't cost effective for us to do that. So we're looking at, again, back to the digital tools, to think about how do we use things like Twitter. Can we get that type of feedback through Twitter? And we're still experimenting, we haven't got there yet, but can we do that? Are there other ways we could be documenting physician feedback, satisfaction, reputation feedback, and that sort of thing without running the traditional survey process with a market research group? So we're thinking about those things right now. I mean, to me, the feedback liaisons get in the field, that's your satisfaction survey and feedback right there. We just sometimes don't do a really good job of structuring it and capturing that feedback in the way you do when you do a satisfaction survey with a structured set of questions. So we're working towards that within our group. And again, with an eye towards what can we do digitally to get that feedback even more robustly from the people that we don't visit with in person in the outlying areas across the country. So a number of things we do. And then internally, there are a million different ways we slice and dice referral activity reporting. We also track on the operations side with our patient access folks. For every referral that comes in, did the patient access staff capture the physician for that patient? Whether it's a referring physician, if the patient was self-referred, do you have a doctor that you see regularly and that we need to communicate with? It's amazing how many patients are in our system that self-referred. And then their doctor calls us really upset that they didn't get the reports and the patient didn't get sent back to them. I think we all deal with that. So we work very hard on the operations side to improve that. So a ton of data and metrics around that. We started off around 65% of our patients had physician information in the system. Right now we're at about 82%, but it took 4 years to get there. So that's part of the reason, if you remember earlier, I said we're taking on a little bit more of that referral process to make sure we get that stuff in the system properly before the access staff need to contact the patient to work on the appointment schedule. So, yes?
I'm curious, so do you own everything that has to do with referring physicians in your organization?
Yes.
Nice.
Notice how quickly he answered it.
That's a beautiful thing. So you have all the communications, the web,
Yes.
everything?
Yes.
Okay.
Took a little bit of work and a little bit of time, but
Yeah.
yes.
Fabulous.
Which is also bad when things don't go right. It's all wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. You get all the credit and all the blame, right?
That's good.
Yeah. No, it's all good. Yeah.
Kind of a follow-up question to the one previous to this. You mentioned 75% of your referrals are coming from the outside of Houston. Obviously, you guys have a national reputation. It's not cost effective to be able to canvass every physician in the country. So, what's your data telling you in terms of appropriate or target practice profiles that you've seen from these? I think you said 13,000 physicians. Right? What are you learning from that maybe meaningful targets in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a real interesting question. It's, as I mentioned earlier, the market share question, people think we've got 100% of the Houston market share in oncology, which anything but that. You see referrals across the board in terms of specialties. And the way it breaks down at the high level is we see roughly, the institutional level, roughly 25% primary care specialties. Maybe another 30% or so are coming from medical oncology, hematology. These are the much more difficult, complex cases, transplant, things like that. And then the rest are coming from, it's probably 15 to 17% surgery. Surgeons are sending cases in, and then the rest of the percentage is a mix of 1% and 2% of different specialties. So it's across the board, but the big groups are surgery, medical oncology, hematology, and then primary care.
Okay, my stomach's growling.
You're hungry?
No.
You got 1 minute?
Go ahead. You've got your hand up for a while.
Yeah, I have a question on goals. So how do you know, or when will you know, if the program itself is a success, or is it kind of a rolling barometer? And then have you thought about tying these efforts into the liaison's goals for the quarter year, whatever?
Yeah, and it's a great question. We're meeting May 29th to outline.
Exactly.
First of all, we're going to do some training for the liaison, but we're going to outline goals. And the good thing about, and yes, I think we should absolutely tie the liaison's performance to some objective measures. With social media, it will be pretty easy to do. So it's exciting as an opportunity. We can look at who's following. These are going to be new Twitter accounts. These aren't going to be their existing personal Twitter accounts. So it should be pretty easy to measure at least some points of some metrics.
The trick will be, and I think you asked the question earlier, is tying together, and what we have in our liaison, their current goals, aside from all the digital stuff, they have two goals, essentially. One's an activity goal, one's an outcome goal. The activity goal is how many office visits, quality office visits with doctors per month. The other goal is a referral goal. Basically, it's increase referrals by 5% across the board each year. So it's real simple, but the activity and outcomes are very distinctive for the group. This would fall under activity. We'd have to talk about how much workload, how much participation do we want you to do in Twitter, and we'll be figuring that out, as Dan says. Not sure what that answer should look like, and I know there's no book on this, so we're going to sort of make it up as we go along.
We'll be here next year telling you about it. Yeah. Our failures and our successes.
That book Dan was talking about, it might be in there someday. I don't know.
Let's continue for a minute through these slides, because I want to share with you some of our thinking, because I think there are two ways we could do this. I'm sure there are more than two ways, but there are two ways that we thought about as we started developing this idea. And the first is, physician relations departments have always been content aggregators. You've always been bringing content together that you share. This is just an evolution of that to the digital space, so nothing new there. And you can use something like, if you don't have a swanky portal or even a physician blog, whatever, you can do a LinkedIn group for physicians and share all this kind of content on a LinkedIn group. And you talk about trusted social media platforms for physicians, LinkedIn is a great one to do it on. So, hence the slide. But we see two potential paths that this could take. One is, if you're fearful, and I think a lot of people would be fearful to say, gosh, I'm going to do what Dan and Lyle are trying to do, which is have all my liaisons out there tweeting every day and sharing links to our content. That scares me. And it might scare your organization. So one way you could do it is you could appoint one person in the department who is the digital media person, who's responsible for aggregating content. Imagine at MD Anderson how much digital content there is that they can pull in that they aren't even accessing right now. Electronic newsletters that people are doing across the institution, all this stuff. So having one person who is that digital physician relations specialist, who's pulling in all that content, parking it wherever it's going to live, and then who's tweeting it out and sharing that information through Facebook, through Twitter, through LinkedIn, whatever the platforms are that you're going to use. So that's one path. The other one is the one Lyle and I are really thinking more seriously about, which is having every physician liaison dedicate a portion of their day, and we're talking of various 20 minutes, 10 minutes, to social media. I think probably 20 minutes because it's 10 minutes at the beginning of the day, and it's 10 minutes at the end of the day because people want a response. If you are lucky enough to have a physician or someone in a practice retweeting something you send out or direct messaging you through Twitter, you want to be able to respond to that and not have them feel like it's a canned program. Where we're setting up tweets on Hootsuite that go out every hour on the hour. The other thing we're going to teach his liaisons is that doctors use Twitter differently than a lot of other people. What time of day do you think physicians are usually on Twitter?
6 a.m.
6 a.m.
6 a.m. at 11 to midnight. Yeah, so between 5 and 6:30 in the morning is a really good time to be reaching physicians if you're tweeting. And even if that physician is already following you, this is one of the tricks to Twitter. You get, if you ever get Twitter data, like, oh, that tweet had so many thousand impressions, it's all make-believe. Because there's no way to know how many impressions you get from a tweet. It's potential impressions based on how many followers each person has and so on. So when you're tweeting at noon, only people who are on Twitter at that time see that tweet if they're following you. So it's okay to tweet the same information multiple times throughout the day. So you can send out the same tweet at 6 a.m. that you send out at 11 p.m. to try to reach that particular audience. And you're not going to annoy them. The odds of them seeing your message are dismal to begin with. So put it out there. Yes?
Is there a challenge with them forming the relationship with the specialists versus the organization? So the specialist leads and then sort of all those...
I would suppose potentially.
And it hasn't that historically always been the case.
That's
in
true.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a great point.
yeah. Just curious.
Yeah.
Lyle, I'm sorry, what's your handle on Twitter?
My handle?
LD Green 66.
Thank you. It's a little sign in the front. Yeah. At LD Green 6. Yeah, that's right.
I don't have a question, I just have a comment. I mean, obviously, this is something that would need a ton of governance around it, and framework, and all the questions are great questions, but I just wanted to comment, I think it's a great idea. I think the first one allows you to foster social within the institution as a whole. Makes more sense from a resource perspective.
I agree.
Because 5 years from now, social media might not even be in people's job descriptions anymore, so I think it's great.
My fear about not having the liaisons actually doing the social media aspect of the job is it's just so hard to sell it and communicate it if you don't do it. I don't know, how many of you use Twitter now? Do you remember what you thought of Twitter before you started using it? I thought it was stupid. I only did it because I do this professionally. I have to understand what the heck it is so I can recommend it to a client or not, But it took me about 10 minutes using Twitter before I discovered hashtags, and I said, oh my gosh. Because, the world, we are natural community builders. We're naturally seeking out people who share our interests, whatever those specific interests are, whether it's religion or politics or healthcare, social media, whatever it is, we're naturally seeking. Look at us today, We're all these geeks interested in this stuff that we're talking about. So hashtags on Twitter give us that ability to find a community and find what we're interested in. And it's really powerful, but I didn't get that. I mean, before I started on Twitter, I had no clue. So it's a powerful thing. And I worry that these physician liaisons, if they aren't actively involved in these social media platforms, won't be able to make that sale. So I like having them all at least peripherally engaged. It'll make Lyle a little nervous, but he'll get over it.
Oh no, it's fun. We got one more.
Do you, when you do that, do you provide them like a content strategy where you try to get them to particularly talk about certain topics, or are you?
Yes.
I think that's exactly where this is going. Yeah, that's, again, you go back to, they don't get the time in that office visit. They just don't to really talk about the broad range of things. You can't do that in a couple minutes, so we're trying to, how can we, I hate to say replace, but maybe more like Dan said earlier, complement that in-person office visit. If I can get 3 minutes with you here, can I get 3 more minutes with you through Twitter or the portal or something like that, where I can get you access more conveniently to the content, the information, answer the questions that you need, that you're not going to be able to do in an in-person office visit once a month or once every quarter.
But are you providing them the topics that you want them to push more than others? Or
yes.
We will. That'll be part of that growth planning I mentioned earlier. That's where that comes from. It's the clinical areas that we're working with, the faculty that we're trying to build their practices. That's where all of that funnels in,
And they do have well-defined objectives, and they know what clinical areas they need to grow. So it will be pretty easy to pinpoint that, define that content for the physician liaison, so they're not out there. I don't want them spending an hour trying to figure out what am I supposed to be communicating today. So we'll do that for them.
And I think early on it'll be very, very focused and targeted.
Yes.
It may be 1 or 2 disease sites, something like that, very early on.
But I'll be honest, you're helping us figure it out. I mean, we're here today because we don't know what the heck we're doing.
If we did, we'd show it to you.
Yeah. We would have already done it. Yes.
So I'm very inspired by this presentation.
Thank goodness.
You did good.
Fill out your evaluation.
Everybody just write that down, tweet hashtag.
Hold it, I'm recording you now.
So just, are there any quick wins that we can take back and start doing right away? And what are some hurdles or challenges or barriers that you've experienced that you can share with us that we can then try to avoid?
Well, I'll go backwards. I'll do the hurdle barrier first. As Dan said,
go ahead.
The guy in my department who tried to get me to do this 2 years ago, we fought tooth and nail about it. I thought it was out of his mind. You want me to tweet? Really? And I thought this was the hookiest thing on the planet. It took a while, but once I saw, okay, now I get what this does or can do, in terms of connecting. And I always think back to when all these tools first came out, the term was called social networking. It was not social media.
Exactly.
Think about that for a minute. That's not what this was, but that's what it sort of has evolved into. But the networking capability is still there. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the networking part, not the media part so much. But they do go hand in hand. So that was the first hurdle, was getting me engaged. As I said, I've been doing this for about 2 years. Sort of that's been our kind of pilot project before we figure out whether or not we ought to get the liaisons involved. And obviously we think that we should. So that was the lesson learned for me. And I would say for you guys, go back, find somebody in your group, whether it's you or somebody else, just try it out. I'll tell you, I spend no more than a minute to 2 a day reviewing a few things. I may retweet some things. Every once in a while, I'll actually tweet something original. So just so you know, I haven't got there yet, but it's been really interesting how many people follow that sort of thing. So I'm basically behind the faculty, if you will. I'll retweet what they're talking about, and then we grow the audience that way. So it's not so much me they're paying attention to, I think. It's the faculty and what's going on in the clinical and research areas that's of interest to these doctors who are following me. And then they figure out who the faculty are they want to follow. So it grows very quickly. But I would say the takeaway, go try it. And if I could do it as opposed to this as I was 2 years ago, you guys can try it too if you're not already doing it. I saw a lot of hands, you guys are already on Twitter, so it's not exactly new anymore. But that was, the takeaway for me, and I would say get somebody in your liaison group, whether it's the manager, director, or even one of the liaisons may already be doing this. We got one guy in our group who's already on Twitter, and we think he may be kind of our point person initially on that. But go do it.
My answer to your question would be, as you start thinking about moving forward, contact Lyle or contact me. Lyle is incredibly generous. He's incredibly generous for this time. The one thing you have to be prepared for is if you ask him a question, you've got to sit there and listen to the answer. But honestly, contact either of us and we'll be glad to share where we are, because it will be evolving for us and we're going to learn as we go. Moses, you're not allowed to ask a hard question, but I saw you had your hand up.
I'll follow up after I had a thought about your question number 3. Just briefly, a way to focus on specific clinical services. I was thinking, referring doctors, thinking about referring to orthopedics, sometimes they refer to the practice because they don't know which doctor in the practice actually specializes in each little thing. And getting back to what Seth Godin said about treating different folks differently, if there was a way to flesh that information out to the referring doc so that they could make a good match for their patient, that's one of their biggest concerns. So by just providing that information, that might help.
Yeah. That is very helpful, and that's something we've been working on with Tufts as well, making it easy for them to find the right person with the right expertise for their patients. Absolutely. Because they don't want to spend a lot of time trying to figure that one out.
Just kind of jumping on that, that's something that I work for an orthopedic practice, so it's a little bit different because they're directing strictly ortho referrals and pain management, but we make it very easy and streamlined that you don't have to worry about who the doctor is, what the name is, whatever, just send it over to the Core Institute and we'll take care of that for you. So it's a very streamlined process that we take that guesswork away from the physicians.
So they're just sending you the general referral without knowing what physician? See, I think that's problematic though to some extent, because I want them to know who the physician is and have that. Go ahead.
Follow up with that, send a confirmation as soon as that patient's scheduled, saying this is the patient that you refer, thank you. It's scheduled with this doctor at this location at this time.
Awesome.
The next time they hear from us is a dictated note. So.
Good. And that's the number 2 complaint I hear when I go. It doesn't surprise you at all, but as I go to meet with these community physicians, they never hear back after they make the referral.
So that's just a follow-up. It's information that.
No, it's awesome. And then that way they do know who the physician is, and they can, if they're curious, they can research that. They can Google that physician or go on your website and learn more about him. Yes?
Do you have an app for referring physicians?
An app? Not at the moment, but we're actually working on a referral app with our internet services team for the local doctors in the satellite. That's supposed to come next month, but I haven't seen it yet, so maybe we can talk about that next year.
So we are about out of time, so I'm just going to end. I'm not going to click any more slides. We could go on forever, but was this interesting? I mean, is this thought-provoking, I guess is what I was hoping for? Go out and try it, and I think Seth Godin's right. We've got to take these leaps, and it's going to make people uncomfortable, including ourselves. But give it a try. See what you can do, because I think this is the frontier. I mean, this is where we need to be. Don't eliminate all the good old stuff you've always done, but damn, push the envelope. So thank you very much. Have a great day.
You too can do a talk with Dan at a conference if you respond to his blog.
Don't forget your evaluations.
Call me. I'll do it.